Emotional intelligence. The very cave you are afraid to enter turns out to be the source of what you are looking for. Joseph Campbell. This right here is a skill no one is directly taught, but everyone needs in order to increase their quality of life. From improved relationships, communication skills, and resilience to increased health, motivation, and stress management, emotional awareness is undoubtedly essential. Unfortunately, this is not something taught or promoted in schools or the workplace. You have to figure it out for yourself if you want to reap the benefits. Perhaps I can provide some insight into what it looks like to be emotionally unaware and then how to work on it. I'll be the first to admit, until I learned about emotional intelligence, I was nowhere near how a 25-year-old should be in terms of this skill. The truth of the matter is you probably know people in your life, your age or older, who are not in tune with their emotions when they need to be. A few characteristics of an emotionally immature person would be self-centeredness, defensiveness, the inability to own up to one's mistakes, lack of willingness to try new things, needing reassurance or afraid to be left alone, and indecisiveness, just to name a few. Do any of these characteristics sound like you? It's okay. Like I said before, unless you put the work in, you don't just grow up to be emotionally intelligent. As previously mentioned, there truly is no course embedded in the education system on this topic. So you have to do the work yourself. Unless you have emotionally aware parents who instilled this skill into you as a child. However, even parents, mature adults, and elderly people can go their whole lives without conquering their own emotions. Knowing how to regulate our emotions when they are inevitably challenged by situations, relationships, and confrontations is going to help us maintain the vibrations we desire to stay in. So where does it all start? According to the School of Life, we can begin with a simple question. Answering this requires a moment of awareness and reflection. Two things you should be familiar with by now. How do we react when someone we depend on emotionally lets us down, disappoints us, or leaves us uncertain? My truth on caffeine, a love story. I still remember the first time I fell in love with coffee. I was 20 years young, working a temp job in an office building as an administrative assistant. One morning, I discovered a self-serve coffee machine in the lunchroom that created different styles of beverages with the simple press of a button. Naturally, I had to try the cafe mocha. Coffee and chocolate? That sounded too good to be true. It was. I had 2 or 3 more the same day. I treated those coffees as refills of water, and I was feeling wired. That is, until my energy came crashing down later in the day. This was the beginning of a 4-year-long caffeine dependency. Sure, as kids, we had pop and chocolate, but we weren't aware of the caffeine content, and we certainly didn't decide to consume these products for the caffeine specifically. Since that experience in 2015, I started to experiment with caffeinated beverages. It started with iced caps and French vanillas at Tim Hortons, and eventually led to the well-known Canadian double styled coffee. Fast forward 5 years later, and I still love coffee and all of its benefits. I've just learned to appreciate it in its purest form, black. I wouldn't have reached this point without participating in my own monthly challenges and rearranging my diet. In 2019, I tried a No Caffeine October challenge for the first time. This was going to be my first time purposely abstaining from caffeine, coffee, tea, pop, and chocolate. And it wasn't easy. The first few days, I suffered from serious headaches and fatigue. After those initial days of uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms, I actually felt as if I had more energy. Was I overcompensating from the caffeine with more food and sugar? Possibly, but I felt perfectly fine without caffeine. I successfully completed the challenge and did it a year later in October 2020. On the second attempt, I aimed for 60 days instead of 30, and it was much harder. I would say the first 45 days were fine. I stopped craving caffeine physically and mentally, but I started to miss the productivity that came with the energy spike of caffeine, specifically my morning coffee. Again, I successfully completed the challenge, but I do have a few takeaways, lessons, and truths about caffeine after being on both sides of the dependency spectrum and learning about the substance. Caffeine is a stimulant. It engages the brain by blocking receptors that usually make you feel relaxed and tired. This results in increased levels of focus, mental arousal, and alertness. And it affects you pretty quickly. Once absorbed, it can take as quick as 20 minutes to feel the effects, and about an hour in, the effects are at their highest. Caffeine has a half-life of about 3 to 5 hours depending on the individual, their body composition, and caffeine tolerance. Half-life means that at about 3 to 5 hours after ingesting it, caffeine is 50% as effective, and with every hour afterwards, it drops by 50% of the previous level of effectiveness, from 100% to 50% to 25%, 12.5%, and so forth. This is why we have those afternoon slumps of energy and often go for that second cup. Caffeine is a habit-pairing and dependency-creating drug. Give a child some pop or chocolate for the first time. They'll want more. Similarly, give an adult a coffee, tea, or energy drink, and they'll probably have another sometime soon. Caffeine is considered the most commonly used drug, and therefore most socially acceptable. From the time I realized I loved coffee in 2015, I decided I needed it and didn't miss my daily coffee for the next 4 years straight. Ask anyone close to me at the time. The effects of caffeine are that your brain chemistry actually changes. Receptors fluctuate, and these imbalances mean a person needs more caffeine the next time around to get the same fix. Along with this created tolerance are physical withdrawal symptoms when a person stops ingesting caffeine. Fatigue, headaches, anxiety, and a lack of concentration, to name a few. Remember, I experienced some of these symptoms during my no caffeine October challenges. It's also a habit-pairing drug, meaning it's easy to pair certain experiences with consuming caffeine. Most often, these are experiences that require us to be focused, alert, and concentrated, such as work or studying. That's why it's no surprise I was in university as I began to love coffee. Every time I went to study, I told myself I required a coffee alongside my schoolwork. That's why it's the most popularized and consumed drug in the world. It aids productivity. And that's not all it does to benefit us. Connect with your inner child. The child is in me still, and sometimes not so still. Fred Rogers. As I write this, my grandfather is 83 years old and still maintains such a positive, uplifted, and energetic attitude. Seriously, he is the funniest and most authentic man I know, willing to strike a conversation and make friends with anyone he encounters in his life to this day. How is this possible? Probably because he still possesses traits and characteristics from his childhood. Our inner child never truly disappears. It lives with us and manifests itself in the way we react to events that mirror our childhood experiences. Sometimes the activities, events, and careers we gravitate towards in our adult lives stem from the same pastimes we enjoyed growing up. As I learn about the inner child, I'm finding out why certain parts of me persist as I've grown up and matured. My enjoyment of driving is a perfect example. The fact I've been driving almost every day for 8 years, and the reason my job is as a driver examiner, is because as a child I was fascinated by this experience. When I was being driven around as a kid, I would use those road atlas maps and try to figure out where we were exactly. I would play racing video games such as Need for Speed. I would collect Hot Wheels and drive them on the mini carpets with roads. To this day, when I get in the car, a part of me gets excited for the prospect to go on a drive, even if it's just across the street to the grocery store. However, our childhoods are not all sunshine and rainbows. Understanding our inner child can show us the hobbies we might enjoy in our adult lives, but it can also reveal the reasons why we have unnecessary reactions and traumas in other areas. When we begin to communicate with and heal the inner child, we can empower ourselves by repairing unnecessary behaviors, increasing self-awareness, and developing a more joyful life. So how does one go about addressing their inner child?